Tonight, we're starting a new sermon series during January and February, and I'm asking you, if you're able in your spare time, to read the book of Exodus over the next 2 months. It's 40 chapters, 2 a day, skipping every third day, more or less. You'll cover it in 2 months' time. And it's a riveting book, and the series is called Revolutionary Religion. Now, I realize not everyone loves the word revolution. Sounds a little edgy, a little political. Makes you think of Chairman Mao's little red book. I got a big red book. It's all about revolution. Revolutionary religion is this: where I am is not where I want to be. And I know that I'm going to get there through the help of God. The way things are is not the way things are supposed to be. And I know that we're going to get there with the help of God. Revolutionary religion makes us dissatisfied with the status quo, makes us impatient for the way things could and will be. It gives us eyes to see what's working and what's not working. It gives us ears to hear whose voice is being heard and whose voice is being suppressed. Revolutionary religion challenges us to put our bodies where our words are and to make flesh what the Spirit is doing inside of us. Revolutionary religion changes us and changes the world in small and large ways. And I believe it's our evidence that God is active in human history. We do not worship a God that is back then, but a God that is still in, still happening, still unfolding, still transforming. Revolutionary religion is the opposite of resignation religion. Resignation religion says, I can't change. I've always been this way. I always end up doing the same old thing. I am resigned to my fate. Revolutionary religion says, no, you're not. Just because you've done it this way, maybe it's the only way you've ever done it, does not mean that it's the only way it can be. Revolutionary religion is not tyrannized by precedent. Revolutionary religion challenges the notion that things can't be different, even if we've never imagined what it could look like. It is enough to know that the way it is not quite right, is not quite full, that there is more change that yet can happen. Revolutionary religion is found in the Bible, and it's embodied most fully in the person of Jesus Christ. And Jesus embodies revolutionary religion so that we can experience it as well. Jesus grew up reading the book of Exodus, hearing the stories of the book of Exodus. And for him, they kicked in every time he had an opportunity to confront a situation of oppression or prejudice or bigotry or dehumanization or stasis. Every time something triggered in him a remembrance of revolutionary religion. I believe that the ultimate expression of revolutionary religion is resurrection. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. Jesus didn't think it up. He spent a lifetime believing that we are meant to change and that change is possible and that visions that we hear about of a new order, a new world are meant to be experienced, and that the revolution in society can also take place in our own spiritual lives. For Jesus, the resurrection is the political becoming personal. And he meant for us to dream big about the possibility of revolution or transformation or change, whatever word captures us in that string of adjectives. Religion that empowers us to live differently and empowers us collectively to make the world look different. That's revolutionary religion, and it's at the root of our tradition. So I want to urge you to read the book of Exodus with me. We'll be reading it together and with different preachers over the next 2 months with an eye toward what revolution is waiting for me, for you, for us. One reason I want us to look at revolutionary religion is not only for the difference it can make in our own lives, but also because I believe this is the year of revolution for Cathedral of Hope. We've spent a lot of time so far in the past 6 months thinking about what has gone on. We're not quite finished with that work yet, and it's time to put equal attention onto what can unfold next. And I think that we're ready. I feel it. I feel it in the church. We went through Christmas. We had a great Christmas. I want to thank the people who made sure we had Christmas on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Thank the musicians especially and the ministers. But I think that we're ready now to move into something next. And what I want to say to the Wednesday night congregation in particular is your prayers for the future of Cathedral of Hope are really vital. What we do on Sunday is important and vital, but what happens on Wednesday is unfettered and open and an experiment place for spirit. And I believe that what we do and the way we pray and the way we worship on Wednesdays will radiate spirit, potential, transformation, healing, revolution through the whole church. We do the work on Sundays as a big group, but here's where it's fueled. And so I want to urge you to pray, particularly on Wednesdays, and to get your friends to come and pray for the upcoming revolution of which we are all a part. It's time to take a new direction. Those of us who are here are the ones who will determine what happens next. We always hope for the return of those who have left, and we also hope eagerly for the inclusion of new people each week to become part of this tide, this swelling of spirit. But here's the truth. If you're here now, you can shape what's going to happen next. And your eager, diligent, faithful participation will make a difference. So I want to spend the next 8 weeks together, biblically, on Wednesday nights, looking at the book of Exodus. Exodus means coming out. It's the great coming out book. It means coming out of oppression. The long formal title when it was part of the Torah was the coming out of Israel from slavery in Egypt. But the short word is Exodus, the coming out book. And that experience that any of us have ever had of coming out from oppression to liberation, from suppression to expression, from slavery to freedom. That's what the book of Exodus is about. Coming out is the fundamental spiritual experience that leads to resurrection. And coming out of life to life eternal is the ultimate expression of it. So the book of Exodus, 40 chapters, the second book of the Bible, the second book of the Torah, the Pentateuch. It's the book that Jesus heard and influenced him. It's also the book that was the most banned by people who did not want religious people to hear about revolution. In the United States, when slaves were first exposed to Christianity by their white so-called owners, the slave owners were terrified that slaves would hear about the book of Exodus. They forbade people to teach slaves to read, specifically because the book of Exodus was one that they feared would lead to revolution. Anyone who's ever been enslaved, oppressed, whether by their own cooperation or through coercion, can find in this book a blueprint for liberation. And like many good novels, or many good stories, or many good epics, the whole story is foretold in the first couple of chapters by suggestion. There are all the makings of what is necessary for a revolution. You remember from the book of Genesis that Joseph and his brothers had found a home in Egypt after a great famine in Israel. And they were valued at first by Pharaoh and the people. But eventually, the Israelites, in 1 and 7, but the Israelites were fruitful and prolific. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. There were too many Israelites all of a sudden. How many is too many? Have you ever been in a restaurant and there's like 3 or 4 gay people and maybe 80 other people, but they're very aware somehow of the 3 or 4 gay people? Perhaps because the 3 or 4 gay people are enjoying themselves, and 3 or 4 gay people can seem like 30 or 40 in a group of 80 that are a little suspicious. How many is too many? It's hard to put a number to it, but you know it when you are it. The Israelites had drawn attention to themselves by being too open, too proud, too strong. And a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, there's too many of them. Let's deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." One way that revolution is ripe is when people forget where they came from, or they're not interested in their history, or they've achieved enough that they forget what it took for them to get there, and they become lazy or comfortable. The people of Israel weren't paying attention to what they had achieved and what it had cost them, and the people of Egypt were willing to take advantage of them, and nobody remembered Joseph. They didn't remember their origins, and that's one necessary ingredient for revolution. It continues in chapter 1:13, the Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites. It made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them. The circumstance that requires revolution takes place not just because there are oppressed people, but because people of privilege allow it to go on. Many Egyptians noticed what was happening, and no Egyptians came to the aid of the Israelites and their increasing oppression. Take note, revolution becomes necessary when allies cease to do their task. We all have situations in our lives in which we could be allies, in which we are not speaking up right now, and for which at some point we may be held accountable. The king of Egypt, this is in 1:15 now, one of the first verses I wanted you to look at, printed in the program. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, so the king speaks to these two Hebrew midwives in order to enlist them in the ongoing oppression that would take place through the regulation of women's bodies. When you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it's a boy, kill him, but if it's a girl, she shall live. And this is the first ingredient for how revolution begins. The book of Exodus doesn't start when the people of Israel cross the Red Sea, leaving Egypt behind and going into the Promised Land. The revolution begins here in this verse. But the midwives feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. And I want to lift this verse up to us. Revolution takes place when average people refuse to go along anymore with their own oppression or with the oppression of others. It is the spark of revolution. It is the spark of resurrection. This example lived in Jesus' mind. I'm convinced of it. If we could interview him and say, what gave you the power to stand up to Pilate? What gave you the power to throw over the tables in the temple? What gave you the power to challenge Roman privilege? I think he might have said, in Sunday school, I learned about Shiphrah and Puah, two Hebrew midwives who were not afraid of power, who risked their lives so that others might live. They were crafty, these two women. Pharaoh noticed that some of these children were surviving, and so they came up with a quick answer. You know, the Hebrew women, when they give birth, they're so fast that by the time it's done, they're up and about, the children are snatched from us, and we don't even have time to do what you have asked us. And the Pharaoh, though powerful and not very bright, says, okay, well, just be sure you take care of it. And somehow, because the impulse to live is always stronger than the impulse to die, because the desire to participate in liberation is always stronger than the temptation to acquiesce to it. These women continue to do their work and to preserve alive as many of the children as they can. Pharaoh commanded to all the people then, since he couldn't control it at the moment of birth, look, whenever you see a Hebrew child, throw it in the Nile, drown them. Think of the enormity of that evil, of that attempt at a final solution. But the power of love, the power of life, the power of revolution is always, always stronger than the power of terror, the power of death, and the power of evil. This is all in the first chapter of Exodus. And the second chapter, we'll do just the first few verses. A man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. This is a relationship that was not recognized by the Egyptians. They still formed family. And the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him 3 months. Rabbis say that this child was luminous. It wasn't easy to hide him. So much light came from him. All the more determined were they to preserve him alive despite everything that was pitted against them. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. Sometimes God creates a safe place for the liberation struggle to ferment. It can be an ark. It can be a manger. In this case, it was a basket. And his sister, whom we know now, Miriam, later is revealed, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Miriam and Moses, together from the very beginning. Just because we ascribe the revolution to Moses doesn't mean that Miriam didn't play a pivotal role from the very beginning. When we tell us the story of our revolutions, let's be sure to give credit to everyone, the women and the men. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and she saw among the reeds this basket. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying, and she took pity on him. This must be one of the Hebrew children, she said. And here is another essential component to revolution. Not only does it take the ones who are oppressed, it takes the ones who have privilege, however that is defined, to take a risk too, and to risk their power, their privilege, their social standing. This was Pharaoh's daughter, and she knew what she was doing when she took this child into her home to nurse and protect. And so she gave the child to the child's mother to be to care for it. And she named him Moses, meaning I took him out of the water. That's what the Hebrew word means, drawn out. This is all about coming out. This whole 40 chapters, this next great story that we're going to go through together about what it means to be in slavery and to imagine what it might be like to live in freedom, to never go back, never go back, never go back, begins with a child whose name is coming out, drawn out. So tonight, I want to invite you to think about whatever revolution you need in your own life, whatever transformation, whatever liberation, whatever motion you need to make, and to look for these essential ingredients in your own life: a willingness to say no to power or to resignation or to limits, and a willingness to take a risk too, because real revolution takes place when everybody's willing to let go and let something new happen. So church, let 2014 be a year of revolutionary religion for us and for Cathedral of Hope. Amen.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go, oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go, go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. We need not always weep and mourn. Let my people go and wear these slavery chains and thorns. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way